give it a minute to see if who all's gonna get people in here. Because there is a slight delay on our side. So, and then on the right hand side of the screen is where you'll see the comments should populate. In theory, sometimes there's a little bit of a. I look really pale right now. Sometimes this is crazy. I look like light skinned friend named Michael Jackson. Ooh, this is really no color. Okay, we just gonna look. We gonna look ghastly. That's fine.
It's alright.
Two
We ain't
base
in the
bitches
sun in a
in life.
minute. It's alright.
My God. I'm trying to see if it's loaded in the Facebook group. See if folks is on. Okay, we're here. Okay, we have a few eyes on us. All right. Hi guys. This is Julesy, and do you want to be CJ or Chloe?
CJ is cool. CJ is cool.
Okay, this is CJ. She's going to be leading today's live discussion, part 2 on this wonderful book right here, Eloquent Rage by Dr. Cooper. I'm positive by now that a lot of you have probably gotten through the book, and then there are probably a good amount of you who, per my most recent book review on YouTube, might just be picking this book up, but it's a really quick, easy read. And there was so much commentary to be had about it when I did my first chat that we thought it would make sense to break it down so that everyone can get their opinions in, and that we're thoroughly going over the book before Dr. Cooper joins us. And we're just waiting for her to confirm the dates that we sent her. But she'll be joining us for a live discussion in the book club as well. And so we're very excited. Okay. Also, yeah, so it shows up as username unless they give a permission to be live for the name to populate. So I do keep a window open for the Facebook group so I know who's saying what, but there's just a slight delay.
Gotcha.
Okay, so we're gonna be doing Chloe, CJ. I'm sorry, CJ. I'm only staying for the brief intro because I'm hungry. I need to go eat during this quarantine. But we're doing chapters 4 through 6. The Smartest Man I Never Knew. I love the shade. Bag Lady and Grown Woman Theology. Also, CJ is one of the cohort members who did you did the thing for A Voice from the South.
Oh yes.
You did a phenomenal job. It was really
thank you.
It was very insightful. I love that you actually understand 19th century literature and the shade in it all.
Cause it's fun. I mean, like it's not
like it fun. You make it fun. It's not necessarily fun for all of us.
Thank you. I try.
I'm trying to see I am not this yellow in real life. I got a dash of melanin in my life. It's this webcam that's making me look ghostly.
It's peeking through. It's the monitor.
All right, Chloe, you can take it from here.
Okay. Well, thank you. So we're gonna start from The Smartest Man I Never Knew. And so I'm gonna just pull up.
You can give some background about who you is though too.
About what?
Who you are.
I am.
Where are you quarantined at? Are you distancing?
So I'm originally from New York. And no, I mean, I was born and raised in the Bronx, but like I grew up in Westchester before, you New York folk clocked me. But I went to undergrad in New Hampshire, and now I'm a graduate PhD student at Northwestern in Chicago. And so in Evanston, but I live in Chicago. That's where I'm currently quarantined. Lori Lightfoot, aka Lupita's Tethered, she just sent out an emergency notification saying that we cannot even go for walks on the trails by the beach. So that sucks. So
Lori Lightfoot, mayor of Chicago.
Oh yes.
She just is like an NBA draft pick, which is also what I accuse Billie Eilish of doing. But Lori Lightfoot really is like an early 2000 draft pick. Like it's crazy. Okay, well, we gotta get everybody gonna have thoughts about the book.
Yes. Yes. So that is me. I study late 19th century visual political theory, primarily Ida B. Wells. Previously, I studied.
Passed away yesterday, 100 and something years ago.
Yes. And so previously I studied Black political women exiles in the 20th century. Nahanda Abiodun, who is in Cuba, and Elizabeth Catlett, who was in exile in Mexico. And so, yeah, so my interests are all over the place, which I don't have any shame about, but, grad programs will shame you about. But yeah, so I like to read, and I think this is a really cool space to just read with friends. I love doing that. I do that with my friends now. I would say in real life, but not in real life currently. So yeah, that's about me right now.
So one more thing before I let CJ get
Oh
back.
yeah,
The syllabus is
yes,
great. So if you have it, please pull it up because we will be using it for part of this discussion. And if
yes,
you haven't purchased it, smartbrown.com/syllabi, because Samantha did a really good job. It really helps curate the conversation and helps us all to dig a little bit deeper. Okay, I'm going to stop hyphenating.
yes. For sure. All right, cool. So we are going to start with the fourth chapter, The Smartest Man I Never Knew. So there were a lot of themes that I definitely wanted to pick up on, and we can definitely pick up as Josie said on things that came from the syllabus, because it was Samantha, right, who did the syllabus for this one. She did a really great job of asking really great questions that brought the reader into this is already a book that really brings people into a personal story within larger structural questions. But I think Samantha did a really good job of bringing it even a step further, of bringing the reader into an even further personalizing question of well, then how then do we ask ourselves what does that mean to us? And so one of the things I guess in general that she's doing here is kind of reconciling her sense of understanding of community and structural violence within kind of the structure of her own family. So through her mom, her this man Bob, and primarily the smartest man she never knew, which is her father. And so, yeah, there's a lot to talk about. There's family relationships and what that kind of does to for us. I know in the last live, I think that was something that really struck with a lot of people, was the sense of family relationships and sense of obligation to other people. But yeah, I don't know. I definitely want to accommodate what people want to talk about in the chat. But the thing that really what stuck out to me was what felt like very hot takes on U.S. militarism and structural violence. Now, I don't know if that's what kind of struck everyone else, because obviously the title of the chapter is The Smartest Man I Never Knew, so it's about her dad. And I saw a lot of people say that they were very emotionally struck by the things that she said in terms of just about the sense of intimacy to her father, and not knowing him in the way that other people seem to know him, and also reconciling, I guess, toxic masculinity. But yeah, what is it when she's talking about I don't ride for what the people call woke land, or what is it when she says when she's talking about the Obamas and is it Boko Haram, and sort of she's kind of wrestling with her sense of I don't like militarism, but I want military intervention in these sorts of things. So how do I reconcile these things? And so, yeah, those are just some of my immediate thoughts. And so I don't know. I'm curious to see. Okay, the messages are not loading, but I'm curious to know, I guess, what kind of.
I don't think there's been a comment in 6 minutes. I don't think there's actually been a comment.
Oh, okay. Well, then never mind. Um, because they keep saying new messages below, and I'm like, I don't see any. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Should I offer more structure than that? Because I literally just had like lots of just like thoughts, but I didn't really have any structural themes. Because on the one hand, she does like have like very just like hot takes on like I don't believe in violence as like the primary means of revolution, but also like these very intimate moments of family. And I was like, I don't know how to disentangle these two thoughts because one's very personal and intimate, and one is like, I don't necessarily agree.
But what don't you agree with?
Well, it's not necessarily that I just inherently disagree. It's more so like I'm not convinced by her being like, well, tear it down and physical upheaval is inherently masculinist and therefore I want to abandon it as like toxic masculinity. So to entangle that with the personal story, it's not that I disagree with necessarily with what she's saying in terms of this sort of decolonial effort as like masculinist, but the entanglements with sort of the toxic masculinity in her family and like militarism, it makes it hard for me to want to evaluate what she's saying about structural inequality, imperialism, racism, because I'm just like, well, I can't like disentangle that from what you're saying about, you know, how alcoholism and militarism like essentially like ruined your family's life, you know? So I don't know.
You can add this newest comment. It's from Jory Stanley. If you click the I next to it, she says, I love that she disputes the narrative of telling women they need to just leave violent relationships without looking at the lack of structures in place for women of color to safely do so. Her mother left and was still experiencing threats of violence. Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sorry, y'all. I'm a slow reader, and I read questions multiple times. That's really real, and I think she does do a good job of. I mean, she's very like clued into like what popular Twitter myth of or not even just Twitter myth, social myth, because Twitter myth is just like social myth. Like the things that are myths on Twitter are things that you can find in like the Moynihan report, like 60 years ago, right? Breakfast Club shenanigans ain't new, right? So it's recycled, but she's my point being that she's very clued into like what people are saying, especially during this moment of, you know, 2018, 2017. As people have referenced when like she's talking about Beyonce and things of that nature. And so yeah, I think dang, where okay, sorry, the message disappeared for a second. Yeah, I think that her specifically saying like that these things aren't sort of isolated moments and not just because, you know, they don't just, you know, happen once and then happen again and again and again, but there's a larger network of violence that happens essentially that impedes them from just leaving. And that network of violence doesn't mean like other people are hitting them or other people are doing things, but it means like they are the primary means of care in their family, and they can't just leave. And so what does it mean? Or that they are dependent on the person who's abusing them. And so what does it mean that they must stay within the threat of violence, right? But also, like you're saying, like her mother left and still experienced threats of violence. And so, yeah, there has to be a larger cognitive shift in terms of like what who is implicated when we say like toxic masculinity. It's not just people pointing someone out and being like you're toxic, but it's sort of implicating like larger structural things and people in place. So I hope that addressed your comment. Kenyatta Smith says, my biggest takeaway was the heart-wrenching impact of the use of militarism in Black families and how Black women and Black girls are not safe in their own communities and families, and that women of color are not a priority when addressing violence among them both home and abroad. No, that's totally, absolutely real. I think that totally gets lost in that, and I think what was it? Was it the 1619 in the New York Times? Was it by Nicole Hannah Jones? It was a huge like report on like 400 years later on like
You mean 1619?
yeah. And I actually had a professor who was a fact checker on that, which is interesting. And but she wrote an essay and she talked about her father being part of the military and like what that meant for her. And yeah, I think what it gets tricky when we talk about Black people being involved in the military, right? But something that people are constantly, or not constantly, but people think about or talk about is the fact that the military actively tries to poach and seduce Black people into being a part of the military, is in itself is insidious business. And so is in itself a side of violence. The fact that there's no sense of care or network or state of relief for Black soldiers when they come home, the sense of loss for families, even as they're, alive but still fighting in the war. And so, or ongoing wars, because war is ongoing. But yeah, I don't know. I do think that the stories of Black women as caretakers in the sort of absence does get lost, and also as the residual caretakers of their like disastrous and violent grief from having PTSD, from being unwell, from being just burdened by trauma, from being at war, that Black women become the primary Black women and children become the primary punching bags, for lack of a better term. And so yeah, I think she's correct on that, absolutely. And I think that was no easy story to read, like, at all. And so yeah, I think that was a huge takeaway, definitely, for that chapter as well. And for her to also note that it didn't just affect her, it also affected her father, who did not I don't think he didn't go to was her father in the military, but it was Bob who was in the military. But it was Bob's militarism and his toxic masculinity that ultimately caused destruction in that family. And so kind of the trickle down effect of all of that. So yeah. Okay. So this person says, I'm sorry, I can't see the username, but says, what do you think about she not believing in militarism, yet would advocate for U.S. military intervention in Nigeria to rescue the Boko Haram girls? So this is an interesting part. So on page, thank you for stating this. Is it page? Yeah, it's page 83 when she says this. It's page 82 to 83 where she starts talking about her sense of disappointment in sort of the Obamas and her expectations. And so she constantly refers to this term of like, or this like turn of phrase of like why is it unreasonable of me to want for Black men, or she's saying Black men, for Black men to fight for Black women's honor, right? I don't want to misquote her. Yes, okay, so she says, it's on page 83. She says, are Black girls ever worth fighting for? I wonder this sometimes as a feminist who still secretly hopes for a man who will fight for her honor. And so I don't know what to do with that. I feel like she also has a page later on. So the her referencing the sort of her wanting military intervention for the girls in Nigeria who were kidnapped is also on page 85. But there's also a page, okay, it's at page 89. And I'm just going to read it. And she says, I'm a Black woman who wants to live in a nation that believes it has a responsibility to Black women as citizens and as people to make the world safe for them. I'm a Black feminist who cannot reconcile my desire for men to fight for my honor with, again, that phrase, to fight for my honor with my general abhorrence for violence. I'm a feminist who cannot reconcile my desire for U.S. military intervention in Chibok with my utter hatred of guns. I'm a feminist who cannot reconcile my desire for my nation state to intervene on my behalf with the woke analysis feminism has bequeathed me about the perils of getting in bed at any level with the logics of patriarchy and militarism, for these things might protect you one minute and kill you the next. So on the one hand, I appreciate her kind of like working through this reconciliation and like these almost sense of like conflicting sentiments, but I'm also just like, girl, I'm confused, and also I don't know how we can disentangle a sense of honor from a sense of nation state, from a sense of patriarchy, from a sense of militarism. Like I don't know. I'm to that question, what do you think about her not believing in militarism but advocate for U.S. military intervention? I do think it's tricky in that like those girls obviously should have been saved, but also you have to, my mind always goes to kind of like a butterfly effect scenario where it's like, well, what were the pre-existing conditions that made it so that a Boko Haram existed to where those girls were kidnapped in the first place? And to think of like, well, what were the butterfly, what was the movement of the butterfly's wings, however the butterfly effect logic works, by US intervention, by US imperialism, that prompted by British imperialism intervention, that prompted and enabled the sense of state violence and resulting Boko Haram, that also enabled the kidnapping of those girls. So even though absolutely, like, you always have to, it's not to cop out. I mean, it is me copping out, but also it's not to cop out of, don't think about, what is US military intervention in that exact moment, because those moments may still happen. But it's also to say that this sort of rescue plan of, well, militarism can still be part of the our plan A and B. It's just like, well, let's rewind 10 steps back and say, well, this was militarism isn't part of militarism shouldn't be part of the solution moving 4 steps forward. We should evaluate 10 steps back and say that was part of the problem to begin with. In mi opinion, that's what I'm saying. That's not what everybody else might say. And so, and not just militarism, I also am saying like structural oppression and imperialism at large, and militarism just being a leg and arm of that. And so, yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's complicated as heck, and that's why I feel like to place that complication within the web of her family life is very hard for me. I appreciate these stories being told, but I don't know. It's always hard, and we could talk about that more in another chapter, because I feel that way in another chapter, because this is kind of like the formatting, the form of her book is her kind of like putting side by side, here's a structural idea in tandem with a personal anecdote. And I think that form has its merits, and I think that it has its flaws.
I'm going to exit out, but I'm going to be in the comments.
Okay. All right, cool. All right, so I'm going to go to this one. This one is ahead. But thank you for asking me that question. I definitely had a lot of feelings with resorting to violence. I'm just going to put it up on the screen. I definitely had a lot of feelings with resorting to violence to defend someone. I understand her mental fight. I think the power that we have as Black women that I've seen and experienced is how we sometimes defend without the violence that men resort to. But obviously, we can all see how the way we defend doesn't always give us a happy solution. This is real. All right. Okay. This person says, sorry. This person says, I felt like her gripe with the Boko Haram intervention was not just the American military intervention, but also how America does not look out for Black American girls. I absolutely agree, because she goes on to talk about how Obama received backlash for his attempt to address the backlash by mentioning in the speech all the things Black women have accomplished and done for America. No, I totally agree. And I think I guess I didn't address that because I did agree with that. And my bad, because I should address the things that I actually do agree with as well. In fairness, no, I do agree with that. That sentiment that, I mean, the US is intervening in things that willy-nilly, right? And so if you're going to, why would you forsake sort of the intervention of young Black girls, right? If that is presently an option in the state that we live in, why wouldn't you intervene on the rescue of young Black girls. So no, I totally do agree with that. Um, but yeah, but she's definitely is still talking about militarism as well. Um, sorry. Kenyatta Smith says, I think it really needs to start with healthy Black men and the rearing of young Black boys that exemplifies masculinity without violence. No, I do think she is also stating that as well. And I do think that is important too. I don't think that these things are mutually exclusive. I do think that these things can happen simultaneously. I do think that they are related. Um, and yeah, I do think um yeah, but it's also just like her saying like, you know, Obama, why are you doing something for Black men that's and not for Black women? It's just like, well, quiet as kept, like you tending to the emotional wellness of Black men is honestly also to the benefit of Black women, because I mean, aren't Black women tired of tending to the emotional well-being of Black men all the damn time? Aren't you tired of being hashtag captain saving these men? I am. Okay. Um, calm down. Can we join the live if we have something to add? Yes, I don't know how to do that yet. Um, mm, first of all, let me. You, I feel like you can. I don't know how to do that. This is my first time. Um, um, okay, I will on this comment, I will get back to you on that because I would absolutely welcome that. I will when Julie gets back, I will ask and figure that out. Okay. Speaking of raising the boys, I thought it was interesting. There was no discussion about how Black fathers or Black men can or should be raising Black boys as men. But yeah, it was. Oh, thank you. But yeah, that's also like fair and true. Yeah, it's not to knock like, oh, like why can't the administration, if you have faith in the administration, if you why can't the administration like take on a project for Black girls? But it's just like, I mean, Black men need therapy too, emotional wellness too, resources as well. I'm I'm not gonna say no to that. Absolutely not. Listen, and that could be a very individual take. I could be, you know, a party of one on that, but that's I do believe that like that maybe doesn't need to be part of a, you know, Black feminist manifesto, making sure that there are separate resources for Black men, but I I can't say that, you know, Black men having resources to take care of their sense of wellness and well-being, and that they're, you know, taking care of themselves isn't in any way benefiting Black women being able to do the same for themselves. Um, Sorry, I didn't put your comment up. I should have done that. I'll do that briefly while I read the next one. Um, okay, Kenyatta. She says, yes, she put one blurb earlier in the chapter, but ended with the marginalization of sympathizing with Black men versus having a humanitarian regard for women. Oh, Julie put, Struggling. Okay. Um, it doesn't want me to be great. I'm assuming, Josie, that it just means I can just do the add guest thing. So I'm just gonna scroll up to that user. Oh, is that for them to like add themselves? Am I supposed to do something? Oh, that's so sweet. But no, for real, am I supposed to do something? Oh, lovely. Hmm. Even lovelier. Okay. All right, great. So, I don't want to move on to the next thing because it seems like Danny um wants to add something to the smartest man I never knew part. But yeah, if anyone has any lingering thoughts, we'll wait for Danny. Um, but yeah. Ooh, what's happening? Mm, okay, maybe well, mm, we gonna wait for Danny. Um, okay, okay. So, um, bag lady. Ooh, Chile. Okay. So before I start, does anybody? I mean, I don't have too many thoughts. Oh no, Danny, come back. I wasn't sure if it was working, so I hid you for a second. Come hither and come back. Okay. Um.
Oh no. Oh, we're both logged in the same.
One moment, people.
Okay. I think what's happening with Danny is that her camera is not connected because that's why it's showing a blue screen.
Um.
So I'm just gonna quickly, if anybody wants to join, there's the link, but it will say connect via Facebook or connect via YouTube. Obviously, connect via Facebook, and then there's a little wheel that'll show up above your picture. Click that just to make sure that you have the right camera, whether it's your webcam or you have your camera on your whatever, or connect it, and that's how it can be facilitated. Just I think there's a little technical difficulty.
Gotcha.
That's all. But we can always come back.
We got Danny.
I just dropped my sandwich
We
with
got her.
camera
You
on
don't
it.
see me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay. Hey, okay, you can
Hey,
X me out.
girl.
Hi Danny. It's so great to
Okay,
see you in the
sorry
flesh.
for the
All right,
lie.
X me out because I need to make a new sandwich. I didn't drop it on the floor. Y'all can have y'all little key. My
Okay.
beautiful sandwich is
Bye.
done. Bye.
Okay. So quickly, I wanted to add, I really feel her gripe on the Boko Haram situation because
Mhm.
I really feel like it was a little bit of performative for the Obamas and for us to have such a like view on the girls and
Mhm.
then for nothing to be happened. Like
Mhm.
why even bring it up in our, kind of world view or make it this thing and we didn't really do anything. So I feel her gripe.
Mhm.
I did definitely notice that contradiction of her wanting that situation, but like you mentioned, I think it's really her wanting black men to kind of do something about it, right? But I want to come and ask a question, and I hope I'm not stepping on the toes, but in the advanced track, we are learning from Dr. Collins that what is unique to black women is their lived experiences and the importance that they have on their lived experiences when it comes to the epistemiology, girl, I don't know how to say that, of black women. And so it's
Mhm.
interesting that when we first started talking about this, CJ, that you said, it's kind of hard for you to kind of unweb, her personal experiences to this structural issue that's happening,
Mhm.
and that kind of we see, and you said it was a format of the book, and we see that in this book of like this is a structural thing that I have an issue with, and then here is my lived experience to kind of show why I have this issue, which I thought was really cool to see in another work outside of Collins.
No, I think that's an excellent point of like Black feminist theory comes from lived experience, right? And so, um, yeah, I think that is something that I to think about some more. But I think for me, um, it's more so about the claims that she's making from the lived experience. So it's like when someone who has lived in the suburbs makes a claim about what happens in the boroughs of New York
Mm-hmm.
at large as and it's just like I don't know what to do with this because I don't want to,
Yeah.
knock your experience because then that in that vein does the same thing, right? It squashes your experience with my personal experience, right? But in the same vein, it's just like I don't agree, but I don't want to say I don't agree with your personhood. I don't want to say
Right.
I
Your
disagree with
own lived
what you
experience.
experienced, right? So that becomes a tricky point when the praxis is personal and the praxis is theoretical.
Ah,
So that gets tricky, right?
yeah.
Um, so when we say Black feminist theory is derived from personal experience, usually, a lot of times the Black feminist theory is still theory. They're not writing. I don't
Practice.
know. I won't say that they do one thing or another, but I'll say like it's hard for me to just say, oh yeah, I disagree with this thing. It's just like, what are you saying? You disagree with her being sad because her dad was. It's like, oh, like
No, yeah.
that's a bit much. So yeah, that's just like a me having like a personal like I don't know how to um I don't know how to contend with this.
Yeah.
And that's not to say it's a good or bad thing. It's just like
Yeah.
that's more so like a limitation of me. And So yeah, because this is like a very increasingly popular format of writing about feminism, right? Like the Roxanne, like a memoir style, right? Like, I mean, you could argue that like Black women have been writing memoir style of theory forever, from Ida B. Wells to A Voice from the South, you know. But yeah, like, you know, you get the Roxane Gays and, you know, Melissa Harris Perry and like even Black Feminism Reimagined. One of my professors, Jen Nash, wrote that one. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's something I'm working through. But thank you for asking that. It's a really good point.
That's all. That was all my 2 cents. Bye, y'all.
Bye. All right, that was fun. I'm glad it worked. But yeah, LOL, Josie, I can't. She said, I'm cackling at advanced. But yeah. Okay, so Bag Lady. So I think that question that Danny asked is a good segue into this because I guess I'll start off just really quickly with my only I'm just looking at my notes really quickly. With my primary thought about this chapter. And so in terms of what it means for the proximity of these stories of what's happening in regard to structural violence and oppression, and then these personal anecdotes. And so I guess it doesn't even have to just be stories or matters of structural violence, right? Because, you know, in the instance of, you know, the Obamas and US imperialism, like that's a more obvious instance of, okay, well, this Obamas are individual people, but they're connected. The implications of their actions are related to these larger structural systems. And so I can say that, you know, oh, well, when she's talking about militarism and the Obamas, that's her talking about a bigger system of people, a bigger instance of XYZ. Or when she's saying, you know, militarism and alcoholism and XYZ and toxic masculinity destroyed my family, like, you know, things of that nature. But on the level of Bag Lady and Sandra Bland, it's just, I was still uncomfortable with the kind of, my apartment falling apart? What is happening? And so the kind of like sort of intimate touches of her life and Sandra Bland's life just kind of made me uncomfortable. And so so I understand that she's kind of using so Darlene Clark Hines theory of the culture of dissemblance. And so huge caveat, I have not read up on the culture of dissemblance. I need to. It's on the reading list, my personal reading list, and maybe the Smart Bronco reading list. But I admittedly am not very well read on the culture of dissemblance. But my understanding from having read this, just the idea that it's about the way that Black women navigate and walk within the world, right? And so Cooper uses this sort of anecdote of, you know, the day that she heard about Sandra Bland was the day that she was occupying within this sense of dissemblance. And that the day that Sandra Bland died was the day that she was walking without it. And that she was existing within a life without dissemblance. And so within the sort of romantic logics of the text, yes, it makes sense to put Bland and Cooper within these paralleled roots of dissemblance, right? But for me, I guess I would just interrogate further how and why it is that Sandra Bland could not, walk with a sense of dissemblance and Cooper could. One of those reasons being that Cooper has a PhD, and so her walking into her journey to the so that's the other thing, these sort of parallel routes to dissemblance was also that they were parallel walking to the university, they were parallel walking to their dream job, and so also just I don't know that she was going to her dream job. Just from a cursory search on Google, this is Sandra Bland was going to a temporary summer job, and that's not to say, and she was interviewing for it, and so that's not to say that can't be her dream job, or that job couldn't be important to her. But I think that's to say that it was her dream is like a really lofty projection that only maybe she could know, as in Sandra Bland. And so I don't know. I just feel like to walk within a sense of dissemblance, right? So Cooper kind of offers that Sandra Bland didn't have the sense of dissemblance because, like, she was outwardly protesting, and she was, deeply depressed, and she was mourning the loss of a miscarriage, and like she was dealing with some things, and so her opportunities for dissemblance were different. And so recognizing her sense of like baggage, that's a derogatory term, but like, the chapter being called Bag Lady. And so I don't know. And then she also recognizes obviously like the things that she's going through, right? As in Cooper. So all that to say that just like the creation of the sense of like the parallel, it just makes me really uncomfortable. I don't know what to do with it is my thing. I feel like when people make parallels, I have to like keep going down that parallel. Like if like one part is like off, then the whole comparison is off, right? Like if you have like a list of, see, I'm about to make a parallel, and that's gonna make me upset. Okay, so the point being that it's strange for an empowered person to also compare themselves to those who are disempowered or also dead. Yeah. So those are my immediate thoughts. I would love to hear what other people thought. And so yeah, I'm going to start reading some of the comments because I see some. Okay. And I'm also going to open the Facebooks. I want to be able to see people's names. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to start reading some of the comments. Oh no, I don't want to hear myself. Shush. Okay. Okay. So I think this is Jory. So it says, as I reflect on this chapter, I'm curious to see how dynamics within Black and Brown households in the United States shift as officials start to release formerly incarcerated persons to prevent the spread of COVID-19. They will be releasing them without any real transitional assistance, as far as I'm aware, into societies that are not offering not offering much work opportunities, experiencing economic stagnation, and discouraging in-person contact. Domestic violence reports have already increased in the past 12 months. I was not aware of that. That's something worth noting. I'm making a note of that because I work at a women's center. But yes. Yeah. That's a problem. I don't know. I have friends who work in prison abolition, and so this is something that gets really effing murky. I truly don't know. I don't know. Something I'm not gonna sit here and just be like, Cooper ain't for saying X, Y, Z. I'm just like, well, I can't propose any alternatives. I can only say that I'm not convinced by this, and this argument. But but thank you for mentioning that because I did not know. My sense of but thank you for mentioning that because I did not realize that. But I will make sure I'm more aware of that. Next person wrote, general question, we don't really got to pay any attention to it, but is this unique to Black women? Reading other people's works often also feels like there's a lot of personal that becomes theory. No, I think that's how life works. Like, if you read, if you read early theory, which it's boring. Literally, it feels cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, if you ask me. But early theory is just like early 17th century theory and stuff like that, or anything pre-18th century, like Hegel, Locke, anything. Dead white men writing about life. It's literally just them observing life. And so essentially all theories is observations of what life is. And like science is like the anticipation of or theory can be the anticipation of what's to come too. So I won't even make that distinction, but yeah, theory is just observational crap. And so yeah, I don't think that's specific to Black women, but the Black feminist theory is just the theory of what is Black feminism, the theory of Black women's lives. And so yeah, I don't know. Theory isn't the idea that lived experience is theoretical, isn't. Now, is every lived experience worth theorizing? I don't know. If anyone has any material to share on this, I'd appreciate it. But yes, please ignore this and move to Bag Lady. I don't know if this was related to the one that I just answered. Sorry if I was being extra. I mean, any material on it, I'll look to see who asked that, but if let me know what type of material you're looking for, and I'd be happy to assist with that. Okay. Okay, this user said same. I was very triggered with her framing it as violence. Both Sandra and Ida experienced while in transit because last year I had a bad flight experience that took me to, and the talk on the good and bad choices we have. Yeah, pretty much it all. It's just real, and I'm sorry that that happened to you. Yeah, I want to hold space for the fact that, like, you know, she was on a train and Sandra was in a car and Ida B. Wells was in a train and, she had to give up her seat before, Rosa Parks ever knew a seat. But, I just, yeah. Okay. So, unless folks want to keep talking about that, I'm going to, we could also talk about just the idea of baggage, because I feel like that's also, it would be fair to talk about that as well, because that's something important to talk about. Unless people just really didn't like this chapter, and then we can move on. That's also fair. Um, but yeah. I'm gonna move on to grown woman theology. Um, but if folks want to go back to Bag Lady, we can do that. Um, so yeah, this other three, I kind of like this one more, most. Yeah. Mm, maybe because it wasn't what I was originally. Obviously she talks about like Christianity, and so I expected it to be first. I expected it to be entirely about that. Um, and so I guess I would have just entirely dismissed it, um, being like, well, I don't want to read this. But she also talks about you know, pleasure and um what it means to be grown and that kind of being a theology. I dig it. I'm about it. Oh, oh yeah, I most certainly meant grown woman theology, not bag lady. Sorry. No, I liked bag lady the least. Um, of like the chapters of all the ones that I've read. Um, I think that still stands. Um, but yeah, did anyone have any thoughts? I guess I could ask y'all questions. I feel like I I don't know. I guess I would want to ask like what does it mean um to establish healthy, intimate lives? Um she uses Patricia Hill Collins to talk about the matrix of domination, but um why did I like grown woman theology? She's talking about sex, dang it. No, I mean yes, but I don't know, just because it wasn't what I was expecting. I feel like for most of them I could kind of anticipate um like what she was gonna, I mean she's not talking about sex like just like the whole time, but she's like talking about, I expected her to talk about faith and Christianity, and I expected that to just be the all of it. Because she said you say theology, and I just um, but then for that to be kind of a subplot to her kind of understanding what it meant to be um intimate in herself um and in control. Um, I was pleasantly surprised. Um, but yeah, that that was it. Um, and she names drops Zora Neale Hurston. Has anyone read the Crunk Feminist Collective blog? I meant to look that up. It's interesting. E. Patrick Johnson has an anthology called Black Queer Southern Women. Um, and what is no in response to? Um, and it's interesting because he talks about, or he doesn't talk about, he interviews a lot of Black queer Southern women. Um, and a lot of them retain their sense of faith because it's just an intrinsic part of the fabric of their lives. Um, but also retain healthy queer sexual relationships with their partners. And so, yeah, there's also a sense of like dissonance between the two, where it's just like, but also not because their queer identity is a part of the church. And I don't know, it's complicated. I don't know. I just thought of that right now because I was looking back at where she talks about her sense of Black feminist theology is a way for Black women to escape the church and to pursue full sexual lives. And I was like, well, some people don't want to escape the church in order to pursue sexual lives. Some people sorry, I didn't mean to curse on live. Some people want to pursue sexual grown woman lives and also be fully enveloped in the cloth of the Lord. And so I don't know that life, but some people do. So I don't know. maybe that's also why I enjoyed it, because I was just like, I don't really have any sort of knowledge or stake in this. So I was like, I'm unfamiliar. I'm not, I'm, I'm, I'm unawares. Um, but yeah. Okay, this person says, I get the pleasant surprise. We went through two kind of heavy chapters that veered from her experiences and we're tapping into other life experiences. And this felt like it was a return to her previous discussions on creating intimacy. Maybe it was a nice release from the other two chapters. I agree. I totally agree. I feels that anonymous Facebook user. You are not anonymous. It's just I can't see who you are on my side. Sorry. No. I dig it. Grown Woman Theology was my favorite chapter too. I like how she discusses that her Southern grandmother modeled for her that Black women have the right to dissent from theologies that don't serve them in regards to homosexuality. I concur. I agree. I did like that. It's funny because it reminded me of my grandmother, who is from Raleigh, who is also very religious, but she it's so funny. When I was younger, I would go to their house and over the summers, and I remember one time I was watching a film in their house, and it was some weird movie where Keira Knightley was like, it don't matter why people were having sex on the screen. Every time a sex scene would come on, I would walk out and pretend to like use the bathroom or get something to eat. And but they was having sex a lot because it was like a weird European film. So I was like, God dang. So I had to keep getting up. And then I was like 16 or something. And then at some point my grandma girl, she was like, why is it that you get up every time they start having sex? And I was like, I'm not doing that. She's like, you have 3 yogurts right there. Like, you don't need 3 yogurts. She was like, it's okay for people to have sex. And I was just like, is it? Because I don't want to watch it with you. But it was just a nice experience to have in retrospect, just to like be like, oh, like she acknowledges that like people can have like healthful sexual intimate lives. And so that kind of reminded me of that with her telling that story. But yeah. Anyways. Yeah. We've been on here for a minute. Okay. So if there are currently no other comments, I do have a kind of a thought, like 2 thoughts that I had while I was like reading the introduction to Eloquent Rage. And so I just kind of wanted to share them and see if anyone wanted to respond. But yeah, so one of the things that she constantly references, both in the introduction and the rest of the book that I've read so far, is talking about like homegirl interventions, right? So like a part of like the sense of like Black feminist theology or Black feminist logic for her is this sense of like homegirlness, right? And I don't know. So I guess my question, just like my immediate question, was just kind of like, how do we negotiate like her offering this sense of like homegirl interventions with also the idea of like all our skin folk and our kinfolk? And just like that model of like, you know, you're not going to bang with everyone just because they're Black, just because they're queer, or, Black and queer, and that being a part of modeling your sense of self-preservation. Because if I banged with everyone who was Black, and her book is evidence of that, right? And so, yeah, and that's not to abandon the sense of like homegrown interventions, right? But to say, like, what do we do? What do we do with them both, right? And my other thing is, what do we do with eloquent rage? I guess these two thoughts are things that we can carry over with us into like the next couple of lives or chats or anything like that. But yeah, just to ask, kind of, what do we do with a rage that's eloquent? So when she's telling sort of the story of the student who said that her rage was eloquent, right? And so, on the one hand, as she describes it, like, sort of, eloquence offers a sense of precision and directness, right? And so that reminds us that our rage can be productive. And I think that's one of the most useful interventions that Cooper offers us, right? And I think that's the thing I think I appreciate most about this project, is that she's reminding us that Black women's rage has been denigrated as something that's unsavory and unwelcome, but remembering that it can be volatile in a productive way, and in a way that's generative to us, right? Which then caveat makes me question why she wouldn't want violent revolution, because then again, we're saying positive things. And so, on the other hand, how does eloquence also feed into, at the very least, the language of an aesthetic or aestheticism? So to be eloquent is to perform a level of competency, to be of a certain standard of grammar, syntax, language expression. And so perhaps Cooper could make clearer who her standard of eloquence is for, right? That for her, eloquence is not for, the dead white men philosophers we talked about earlier, that don't give a crap about she nor I. And so, but that she might have an eloquence and an eloquence of rage that speaks to these Black homegirl sensibilities, right? And so maybe she does speak more about this towards the end, and I just haven't finished the book yet. But that's something I'm hoping to see and discuss more in the future. And so, yeah, that's kind of my final thoughts on the book. Excuse me. So yeah, that's kind of a thought that I had about what it means for rage to be eloquent, but also generative, to our projects, to whatever project that you may determine your Black feminism to be. So yeah, if there are no further immediate comments, I think I'm going to end it there. I'm extending my words to see if there's a final comment. No. All right. Let's take one sip more water. This person says, I honestly feel that we need eloquence in our rage. I think that's what she's saying. Black women's rage without eloquence is a joke. Why do you feel that way? Why is it a joke? I don't feel like our rage is a joke. Oh, this person added a joke to people who don't appreciate our humanity. But so what? If it's a joke to them, it's a joke to them. But like, sometimes jokes are insider outsider. like if they think it's a joke, but other Black people acknowledge that my rage is productive. And then that's the thing about like language and like all that stuff that I think is what I was also trying to say is just like it she has to. I think she could do a better job of stating like who her eloquence is for, like who her audience is, like who is she trying to be eloquent for, right? If she's trying to be eloquent for other Black women, so is she trying to be comprehensible and aesthetic to Black women's sensibilities of what is rage and productive? Or is she trying to be eloquent so that white people can understand her, so that the white woman who's yelling about her iPhone not working at Apple Care can understand what she's saying? Boo-hoo, I don't think that that's a useful generative use of my rage, personally. That's me. So I guess it comes down to what is a joke to you in terms of like, and what is eloquent? What is the eloquence of your rage to you? You know? All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for being so kind and so fun. This was awesome. I'm so tired. Quarantine sucks. All right. I'ma go nap. I hope everyone's taking care of themselves too, checking in with friends, doing some like reading, taking some baths, doing some sugar scrubs. Okay, bye. Check out. Ooh, how do I do this? Bye.